Well, welcome to day 9 of the 21 days of goals. You are staying consistent. You've tackled quite a number of chapters so far. And today we're going to continue that journey as we dive into chapter 9, which is start at the beginning. I love how Brian Tracy opens this chapter with a key insight. He says, once you've decided your values, vision, mission, purpose, and goals, the next step is to analyze your starting point. Now, that sounds simple, but the truth is that many people know their general direction that they want to head in, but they've never taken the time to understand where they are right now. So that's what we're going to do together. We're going to dive into and explore how do we find that starting point. But knowing where you want to go starts with being honest about where you are. And I like the way he says it in the book, brutally honest. And on page 100, Brian Tracy emphasizes the importance of taking a long, hard look at your current situation and to be honest about where you are and why you're there. It's this honesty that creates the foundation for making the necessary changes for us to move forward. Now, one of the tools to help us with that Brian Tracy introduces us to in this chapter is zero-based thinking, which starts with this powerful question. He says, knowing what I now know, is there anything that I'm doing today that I wouldn't start again if I could do it over? Now, if the answer is yes, then the follow-up question is, how can I get out of this situation and how fast? Because here's the reality. We often get stuck in situations where we've invested time and money and emotions, but we feel like we have to stay there. And Brian Tracy reminds us that you don't have to stay where you're stuck. I like the way Jim Rohn used to say it is, if you don't like where you are, then move. You're not a tree. So what area of life is causing you to feel the most stuck? And it's usually those areas of stress where zero-based thinking is needed the most. Let me give you one way to think about it. It's kind of like cleaning out a cluttered closet. In my 25 books that changed my life, I review the book Essentialism, and I kind of talk about this there, but I'll repeat it for you here. It's the fact when you go to your closet and it's cluttered and you pull something out, you start by asking yourself, if I were shopping today, would I buy this item again? Well, if the answer is no, then it's time to let it go. In the same way, zero-based thinking asks, what habits, commitments, and projects are no longer serving me? Or what do I need to do to clear out so I can make space for new progress? Sometimes clearing out the clutter is the first step to clarity. Now, this chapter is not only about what we're cleaning out, it's also about what we are collecting, specifically the skills we need to succeed. In fact, on page 105, Brian Tracy suggests that we each do a skill inventory. He says that jobs seldom have more than 5 to 7 key result areas. These tasks are critical. You must be excellent at each one of them to do the whole job for which you are paid. That's key. We need to look at our area, what we do. What are those 5 to 7 things that make the high performers excellent? And then ask ourselves, in those areas, where am I the weakest? Where am I the weakest? And where can I make the biggest improvement? Because remember, through this whole process, we are focused on development. Improving in just one key skill can significantly boost your performance. You know, one of the biggest perspective shifts for me was seeing myself as a value-driven professional, or as Brian Tracy puts it in the book, as a bundle of resources capable of great things. That's what we need to look at ourselves and say, hey, how am I developing? How am I adding more value in my professional space? And we can do that by looking at our weakest areas and growing in those. So here's some reflection questions that I felt like jumped out in this chapter for me. The first is, what good habits are helping you move towards your goal? It's a good thing to take inventory of. The second question was, what bad habits are holding you back? And these just aren't questions for reflections. They're actually call to actions for us to analyze while we're looking at our starting point. So one of my final takeaways from this chapter is the strategic planning that Brian Tracy does with businesses, and he asks 4 questions. And I think these 4 questions can be a big benefit to us. So let's review them real quickly. The first is, where are we now? We've got to identify our current situation as we get on the road to heading towards our goal. The second question is, where would we ideally like to be in the future? We got to dream big. What does success look like in the year ahead? And then number 3 is, how did we get where we are today? What have we been doing that's working well? What is no longer serving us? All of those things we want to take time to identify. And then the fourth and final is, what do we do now to get from where we are to where we want to go? I want you to identify some actions that you can take to bridge the gap. Now, you're going to start to know a theme. We're doing this quite a bit in each chapter, every time looking at it from a slightly different angle. So I want us to focus on the action step in the back, and that's going to be number 1. Determine the reality of your current situation relative to your major goals. Where are you now, and how far do you have to go? That's what starting at the beginning is all about. And I'm going to encourage you to be brutally honest with yourself. Take 10 to 15 minutes, write down your current reality, and identify what's working and what's not. Now, this step is foundational for creating meaningful progress. Now, Chapter 9 was all about identifying your starting point so that you can make the changes that you need to make to move forward. Now, remember, honesty is your greatest tool here. The clearer you can be about where you are now, the more effectively you can chart out the path as we move forward. I'm excited for Chapter 10. In Chapter 10, we're going to dive into a familiar framework, but we're going to do it in a specific way. I look forward to seeing you tomorrow to go through that together. I'll see you then.